the darker elements to this reality is the manipulation of our emotional energy for the purpose of creating our collective experience. This means that this manipulation takes place through forms both subtle and severe. One of its most intensified expressions is through war, and it's the deeper purpose as to why war exists. This substance that we produce from our emotional energy has been called many names. One of them is loosh. So today I will be explaining what loosh is, why it's so important, and at the end of this video, I will be sharing with you how to prevent yourself from having your loosh harvested so that you can become spiritually sovereign. Humans are a fractal of the multiverse. One could argue that everything is a fractal of the greater universe, and they would be right. But humans are in a unique position in that we are a compressed form of the entire cosmos and have the capacity for self-awareness. What I just said sounds pretty harmless, and yet you would not believe how dangerous of a combination this makes it to be human. As a fractal of the multiverse, we are a wellspring of eternal creative life force. There is no running out of this energy, and there is no lack of it. It is an endless reserve of passion, power, and vitality that can best be described in human words only as abundance. We can imagine this wellspring of eternal power flowing to us through a pipeline from the uncompressed universal expression of ourselves. And it's through this pipeline of sheer life force that we generate the frequency of worthiness and bliss, which call forth the experiences we wish to have. This creative energy wills itself into being through our desire. It informs the field how to materialize through our intent, and it shapes the world around us with its frequency. We can weaken this pipeline through constricting it with doubt or riddling it with holes by feeling disempowered. As much as we can direct our energy with empowerment and authoritative intent, we can also diminish it. This life force is truly the fuel that animates thought into being, and as creator beings, we can use it however we would like. Sit for a moment with how valuable this substance is in the larger scheme of things, and how much of a precious commodity it would be for some to collect this exponential life force from multiple sources and harness it for one's own intentions. This creative life force that we all embody and that we all have access to is not negative, but it can and is leveraged in order to generate very negative collective experiences. And humanity is constantly being inflicted with every form of trauma one could think of in order to extract our emotional energy. When this energy is in its natural state, it's called fuel, or more commonly known as love. When it manifests as the negative form of life force, it's called loosh. Loosh is the substance that is emitted from all beings when they are in the state of intense distress. In this tarnished condition, like feeds like. The turmoil produced by loosh acts as the source of nourishment for both extra-dimensional forces and their human counterparts that receive pleasure through actually inflicting trauma. This is not in the same class as energetic vampires, so if you'd like to know more exactly about energy vampires, let me know in the comments, and I'll make a video explaining that concept in depth. Humans produce suffering all on our own and without the help of outside forces. And we would also be able to solve that very same suffering as well. And we would continue this process of suffering and resolution into evolution. That's how one evolves. But when you throw into the mix that the entire system was designed from the get-go to maintain our already fractured psyche in order to better harvest us for our loosh, that puts things into a larger perspective. In this case, it could be a little bit more challenging to reach resolution once you get parasitic thought forms involved. The more a being has the ability for self-awareness, the more substantial that source of loosh is. This is because consciousness holds more life force. We innately carry more life force by being able to self-inquire, assign meaning, and discern. Consciousness itself is the carrier and director of our fuel, which is why so many belief systems prey on our consciousness. It makes for quite the buffet. There is an important precursor in order for our life force to be converted into loosh. A being or many beings, have to be in the state of fight or flight, and they need to have a strong negative belief plus a strong negative emotion. There are numerous ways that intense distress that creates loosh can manifest. Violence, fear, grief, pain, rage, depression, loneliness, submitting to pathological institutions, and panic, to name a few. Separating people intentionally so that they long for one another also generates a lot of loosh. The adrenaline that floods into our system, the overwhelm of being in fight or flight that short circuits the body-mind, creating disconnection. The soul loss we undergo when an aspect of our psyche absorbs the shock of the trauma by breaking off, fracturing itself so it can save itself. When I say we are in separation consciousness, it is no metaphor. In fact, humanity is in a severe state of soul loss, and the world stage only adds all of our energetic fuel to the flames. It is continuously used for one thing and one thing alone, to produce as much loosh from the collective as it possibly can. Have you ever noticed how high-strung the world's nervous system is? How there's always a colossal conflict, one after the other, shaping the field, imposing itself on our true potential, and constantly molding reality into its image. We could grow so accustomed to horror that we mistake the biggest tool used to harvest loosh, like war and the media, as a natural or even a noble part of reality. And yet, the hidden purpose behind these instruments, as well as every other orchestrated event to reach the world stage, is only to extract our loosh. The terminology for this dynamic in Eastern mysticism is called yaja, and food for the moon. In fact, the way we are able to tell if the media's brainwashing has been complete is if humanity thinks that war, or any other form of coercion, is a necessary and valid concept. That is the opposite of enlightenment. That is the successful corruption of a being's free will to become an instrument for pathological forces, who create the problem so that they can create the reaction in order to create the solution. And none of this could possibly be if they cannot convince victims themselves to victimize other victims. It's never done for any other reason than to hypnotize us into separation consciousness, re-traumatize the collective psyche, and then use that loosh to create new timelines. As you can see, this is a pathological feedback loop, and this is one of the lessons a human being needs to learn in order to become spiritually sovereign, that we must heal the psyche enough to recognize pathology. Being able to discern pathology is the single most important way to make sure your loosh is not harvested, because we have become so desensitized to this version of reality that we cannot actually see its pathology accurately. And so we keep feeding our power and our life force into the system or to controlled opposition that are all going back into the feedback loop of sending our loosh. So the way that you become spiritually sovereign is to first identify pathological behavior, which is so much easier said than done. And the second step is to develop emotional intelligence. Because in truth, if humanity was not emotionally stunted, we would easily be able to identify pathological behavior and the forces that are wielding it. And by identifying all of the different forms that pathology disguises itself as, we would no longer continue to be manipulated by it. Because of the way that this universe is set up, humanity may not be where this dilemma of loosh originated, but the only way to resolve it is through integrating the psyche so that our creative life force is no longer continuously being hijacked. This is done by becoming trauma-informed and healing the inner schisms in our mental and emotional bodies. Creating a trauma-informed collective is the only way to break this negative feedback loop that we are in. This doesn't mean we ignore the outside world and don't do anything about it, but how will we be able to know what our personal form of service to the external will be if we were straight up wounded? No one can tell you what that service will look like except yourself. In order to create a timeline that is prosperous and optimal, we would need to heal the severe state of soul loss that we are currently in. Treating ourselves and the world like we are in a significant state of soul loss may sound bleak, but it's actually super liberating because now we have the context that can actually shift this paradigm. It's important to make the distinction here between having negative emotions and emitting loosh. It is entirely normal to have negative emotions. They're a part of this experience and they are not unnatural by any means. However, when you become intimate with your negative emotions, and when you know their name, and you allow them to be fully felt and received, and can hold space for them, this is the complete opposite of loosh. This is alchemy. I hope this has helped you reclaim your sovereignty. Make sure to subscribe to this channel for more higher dimensional guidance through spiritual awakenings. See you next time.